Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Simply Cyber Firesides. I am your host, Dr. Gerald Auger, and I am thrilled to have you all joining us today for the live stream. Whether you're tuning in live with us right now or you're catching up on replay, thank you for taking time to be here. Hashtag Team SC. Today, we have an absolute powerhouse in the world of web application security joining us. Our guest is a veteran, an entrepreneur, a teacher, and a true master of making HTTP requests tremble. He's the creator of the Recon NG framework, a Burp Suite expert, and he's a passionate advocate for open source security tools. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your Oprah emotes together as we are going to be welcoming Tim Tomes, also known as Landmaster53, in the cybersecurity community today to the stream. Tim is an application security engineer with a wealth of experience ranging from software development to full scope pen testing. He's worked as both a technician and a leader for the United States military and private industry. Currently, Tim specializes in application security and he trains others in web app pen testing and secure software development. He also keynotes conferences, which he most just recently did the other day, which is pretty impressive. And maybe we'll get an opportunity to talk to him about that. Now, before we dive in and get all up in Tim's business, I do want to remind our live audience who's with us right now, the squad members, the hashtag Team SC folks, that this is an interactive show. If you're a first timer and you didn't know that, well, welcome to the party, pal, because we are all about engagement. We'll be discussing web application security, a critical aspect of our modern society, right? Who doesn't have a SaaS app, right? So if you have any questions for Tim about web app vulnerabilities, secure testing techniques, his experience in the field, moving from military to private sector and cybersecurity, even getting into web apps, is bug bounty worth doing? I don't know. We'll find out. Don't hesitate to drop your questions in chat. I do ask that you put a Q at the front so it's easier for myself and the mod team to be able to identify those particular chat comments as questions so we can flag them and get them to Tim as quickly as possible. We will try to address as many as we can throughout the conversation, but from time to time, there's more questions than there is time. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the Oprah emotes. It's great to see so many familiar faces and blue badges in chat right now. Without further ado, let's go grab Tim Tomes, Landmaster53, and bring him on to Simply Cyber Firesides. Let's go, Tim. What's up, Tim? How are you, boss?
Hey, how's it going? I am doing well. Thank you, Jerry.
Absolutely. Love it, dude. So, Tim, you've had a diverse career in cybersecurity. As the intro mentioned, you went from military service to private industry. How have your experiences led you to specialize in web application security? Because that's really what we're here to talk about today. Sure. What makes that feel particularly exciting for you?
Well, it's funny because I actually never intended to get into security.
Oh, well, you're very good at it. So.
Yeah, it just happened that way. It's funny series of events, but I started writing code when I was very young. A lot of it goes back to just wanting to make video games work, right? But I started writing code when I was very, very young, in the late 80s, actually, on probably one of the first home-based personal computers you could get. And so I started writing code there, basically just trying to make things easier, to script getting drivers set up and launching games and stuff like that. And that led from one thing to another, and code just was always a part of something I would do. My dad would ask me to write an application that calculated amortization tables for his mortgage, or he would ask me to help do something else silly. And he knew that I could write programs, so he knew I enjoyed it. So he'd kind of feed that, find reasons to get me to write code, and I always did that. So I was a huge nerd, right? I was a huge nerd, and I was also really small. Going into I didn't hit my growth spurt till for those that have seen me live, I'm like 6'2" now, but I was 5'4" till I was like a junior in high school. And when I got into high school, I really didn't want to go to PE. Like, I dreaded being in the locker room because I was the little guy, right? And so I remember JROTC, right? The guy that ran the JROTC program at the local high school stepped in and was like, "Hey, if you do JROTC, you don't have to do PE." And I was like, "That's it. I'm doing JROTC." And that started my whole military career right there. I ended up fitting in really well. I had no problem with authority and discipline. I loved it. I thrived in it. Ended up with an Army scholarship, went to college on that scholarship. Did information systems, not computer science, when I was in college. I really wish I would have did computer science at this point, but I didn't. I did information systems. Regardless, when it was time to go into the Army, I had to do something with computers because that's all I was really good at. And so I ended up hitting the Signal Corps, which is where all the computers were at the time. That's where all that was managed. And through some different channels there and really excelling and getting certified in a lot of different places, I ended up landing at the Army Red Team. About probably midway through my career, landed at the Army Red Team, and that's where I got introduced to security.
So let me just ask you right there, Tim.
Sure.
Getting onto the Red Team in the Army, like that's like sick, right? Like everybody in chat would be like, that would be such a sick opportunity. Was it just completely coincidence, like just pure dumb luck? Not dumb, but you know what I mean? Like, or was there some factors at play that led you to that opportunity?
Yeah, there were. So I ended up finishing top of my class in what's called the Captain's Career Course, which is what every captain has to go through in order to move on to the next level in the Army. As an officer, I was an officer when I was in the Army, and so I had to do that. So I finished first of my class there, and then I also had just gotten back from Iraq. So the combination of those two things gave me first pick to any of the assignments that were available to my class. And so I was able to pick from those, and it just seemed like a really cool thing to do. In fact, Stuxnet, I think it happened pretty recently, so that was really big. And cyber was becoming a household term at that point in time. It wasn't developed in the Army yet. In fact, I don't even know that our cyber was really established at the time. But it just seemed really sexy. So I was like, I want to go do that.
Yeah.
Washington, D.C., it was just kind of a neat job. And so that's how it ended up going in that direction. But yeah, go ahead.
No. Keep going, because like I want to take a moment and pivot for a second, because chat is exploding about your lanyards behind you. All right. Well, let's just put a pin in that. So people in chat, whole lot of lanyards, so many badges. DJ BSEC thinks you've been at DEF CON 1 through 34 here, or 1 through 32, I think was this year. Mad collection of lanyards. It is a great trophy, Tim. So you know, you got a lot of badges, man. Any particular ones stand out, or you know how many you got sitting there?
I have no idea how many there are, but I do know what I will say is probably there may be one or two up here that weren't speaker badges. So they're all either speaker or trainer badges. So I've been training a lot of conferences, speaking at a lot of conferences. It's something I love doing. It's a huge, and anybody that's been in my classes know it. I have a huge passion for sharing everything that I have the pleasure of knowing. And so when I have a chance to go speak about it, I do. When I have a chance to go teach about it, I do. And so they're all either training or speaking badges, but there's probably, I'd say 40 to 50 up there pretty easily. But yeah, I don't know if there's any particular one that stands out. I mean, the DEF CON ones are totally really neat badges. They're just awesome badges. But then, like, my favorite conference ever was DerbyCon. So I take my entire stack of every DerbyCon. I made every single one, my entire stack of DerbyCon badges, and those are just so precious to me because it was my favorite conference, even though they were just patches, right? There was nothing special about them. They were other than just it being DerbyCon. So
I feel like it's the nostalgia associated with it. So than the actual physical badge itself, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
I never got to make it to DerbyCon, but I love Wild West Hackin Fest, and I hope you know, I've heard people say it's similar. So have you been to both conferences, Wild West and DerbyCon?
Yeah. So I was at the first two Wild West Hackin Fests.
How does it stack up from a DerbyCon comparison?
It feels like it feels the same. So it's got a very similar feel. Now, I haven't been to Wild West Hackin Fest in recent years. It's been a while, but the first two felt very similar in terms of just the lack of drama, right? The knowledge sharing and just the community love that was there versus, you know, the different sects and the sects in SECTS, right? The different sections of people and cliques that would tend to, the culture side of it, right? The culture side of it kind of goes away and it becomes very much just a big family type event. And that's what DerbyCon was all about, right? Making it a family event. So it was, it's good. I'm looking forward to it. I'm there this year. You're keynoting and I'm right on stage right after you. So
that's cool.
I'm up, man.
I mean, maybe I can try to like you know, introduce like, you know, like the keynote's just opening remarks for the real reason people are in the audience, getting seats for Tim Tomes. I love it. Justin Gold saying I'm getting FOMO for DerbyCon right now.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, man, I heard it was pretty good. We got the Simply CyberCon badge. Tim, I don't know if you know, or if you've ever been involved with hosting a conference, but we at Simply Cyber are hosting a conference here in Charleston on November 1st. It'll be our first in-person conference. We're getting badges and everything like that. So we're pretty excited about that. Actually, you're more than invited, Tim, to come, since you may be able to get to it. I'll share the resources with you later on.
Please do.
So I know you said you like helping people. We did have a quick question in chat here from Carrie. Self-identifies as a noob, wants to get into web app security. So I'm sure as an expert in web app security, you get asked quite often, how do I, get into that specific niche? What's your kind of advice to people who have this common question?
Yeah, that is a super, super common question. And my number one, the first thing I would say to do is, if you don't already know how to program or write code, specifically web code, start there. Absolutely start there. As someone that teaches lots of people how to conduct web application security assessments and pen tests, you typically get three different types of folks in the class. Those that don't really want to do it, but they're kind of managers of those people, so they just want to know about it, and that's fine. Then I have actual practitioners, those that want to do security assessments. And then a lot of times I have developers, those that need to get better at security, want to know what the bad guy is going to do to their applications, or maybe they want to become a champion for that because they think it's cool and they just want to get better at it. But those are the main feeders are developers and those that just want to get into it because they're already on the security side. I will tell you that it's way easier to take a developer, someone that knows code, and teach them how to be a really good web application security tester in a much shorter period of time. It's very difficult to take someone from, say, a network or systems background and try to teach them how to do web application security when they don't understand the core concept of how the code and the program works, because that's such a huge part of this. I mean, reverse engineering is a massive part of assessing web applications. We're putting things in, we're getting things out, and it's our job to put together the pieces on the backside where we can't see, and then find out where those potential bad decisions were made, and then test those things. But if we can't build that back end logic in our own mind, then it's really hard to do. In fact, I would say it's virtually impossible to do that. You may have a cheat sheet with a list of payloads that you can throw in somewhere and trigger something, but you still don't fully understand why the thing happened, right? And that's what takes you to that next level of, okay, well, now I'm getting this particular payload back. How do I tune it? Where's this happening on the back end? What else could this potentially lead to? So on and so forth. So I would say the number one thing is begin to learn to code somewhere.
Definitely. And it makes me think, kind of similar to being a cyber engineer, right? Like, you kind of need to understand how networks work and how operating systems work correctly, so you can understand how you could abuse them, exploit them, and make them do things. Very, very comparable. DJ BSEC, I haven't read this one already, but I'm reading it in live.
Yeah,
you were management. Yeah, if you were management that didn't understand web app security, what are a few things you would ask your devs for to prove to you they were developing securely prior to pushing to prod? That's a great question.
Test results from an adequate pen tester, right?
There
That's
you go.
really what it comes. I mean, I know that sounds like, but that's really what it is, right? Because you don't know what you don't know, and that's a real problem in the industry as a whole, though, because how do you even know that you're hiring the right people to conduct a good web application security assessment, right? Like, I think about that all the time. My clients hire me. It's very easy. It would be very easy if you're an unethical individual to take advantage of folks, be a really good salesman, but then just not do a very good job at a test, give them a clean bill of health and walk away, when in reality, there's a ton of vulnerabilities there. So it goes back to just not knowing what you don't know, right? And you don't know what you don't know. And so you really want to have a good relationship with someone that can validate that security, right? And then that's what I would say. Bring me a test report by someone that I know knows their stuff. And if they say that you're writing secure code, then I believe it, right? But hopefully you have a better relationship with your developers in the first place, that you can trust them. But once again, they don't know what they don't know either. So you ask them, hey, are you writing secure code? And as far as they know, yes, I'm writing secure code, but they've never had secure code training. Then that's another issue, right? Send them to PWAPT. Then they can discuss a little bit about whether or not they believe they're writing secure code. But yeah, there's a lot of variables there, but there's not a whole lot that they can do to tell you themselves if they themselves don't know what secure code looks like.
So would you be looking, say you're going to get a pen test, right? I mean, there's a lot of pen test companies out there, but getting secure code review pen test, to me, that's a more specific pen test skill set. So are you looking for pen testing firms that have a certain skill on their bench?
Yeah, so it's a very different animal, right? And I would say that a lot of and I'm generalizing here, right? But I would say that a lot of the industry, when they think about web app pen testing or when they're doing web app pen testing, a lot of times they're approaching it from the perspective of, we have this entire environment. And in the process of attacking in the environment, I'm coming across a web app and I want it to become my bridgehead. Okay. I would say that that's a common way that folks are finding applications, but that's nowhere near the kind of work that I do. The environment has nothing to do with it. There's no OSINT involved in the way that I approach web applications. My clients give me an environment, they give me the code, and they say, tell me what's wrong with my application specifically. That takes, to me, that's a little bit of a different skill set, because the only thing I need to be good at there, the only thing I need to know how to do is review that application for vulnerabilities, whether it be the dynamic interface or whether it be the source code. And once again, it goes back to knowing how to code, right? And so if I'm hiring an organization if I'm going to be hiring an organization to conduct a test, I would hope that their testers, right, that their testers are writing software, contributing to open source software, finding vulnerabilities through research, and then publishing that stuff. That's what I would look for is in their resumes, is actual interaction with code, not just this person's really good at conducting a network pen test and can pop a shell on an old Tomcat server or whatever it is, right? So yeah, it's definitely a completely different skill. I think it's much larger than most security people give it credit for.
As a follow-up, he wants to know, should a pen tester that was unethical give a clean bill of health for an app and that app was then popped? Should they be on the hook for restitution? That's an interesting question. And it may not even say unethical in that they were intentionally lying, but maybe they were unskilled or they misrepresented their capabilities.
Yeah, well, I will tell you what, I don't ever guarantee that there's not going to be anything left when I'm done. I think that would be an awfully irresponsible thing. In fact, I would say if any company is willing to tell you they can guarantee by the time we're done there's no vulnerability we haven't found, do not hire them, because that's not possible. Okay.
Yeah, you can't prove a negative, right?
It's just not possible. So number one, I never give that particular promise myself. Should they be held on the hook? I mean, I think if it's in the contract. Oh well, I mean, that's a tough one, right? Where did I see a similar situation with that recently? Was it the CrowdStrike thing?
I mean, CrowdStrike's going through all sorts of legal stuff. I mean, Delta lost $500 million.
Yeah,
Delta,
exactly right.
Delta was suing everyone. Delta's like, Microsoft's at fault. You're like, what the hell? How?
I mean, you think about, because I think this is on the development side rather than the tester side. It was should developers be punished for that, for writing something that caused that to happen? Just like if a developer wrote a patch for a medical system and they push that patch, and next thing you know, 30 people in a hospital die because their machine stopped functioning properly. Should that developer be on the hook for that? I don't even want to give an answer to that. I just don't know. I don't know whether they should or not. That's way beyond anything that I would hope I find myself in. I was going to say,
like, stay tuned for the show where we get a lawyer on here.
Yeah, exactly.
And start.
That's a tough one.
Although I will say we did have a lawyer on once, and like I forget what it was, but like even the promo card said something like, get all your answers with this lawyer, and she was like, yeah, we can't, like, we gotta definitely rephrase. So I don't know what kind of answers we would get. So all right,
you never let me get back around to telling you why I think web application security is the coolest field.
All right, yeah, drop it on us. Why is
web eventually going to get back around to that when I was talking about my story. But the thing that I think that sets something like web application security apart is I don't stand on the shoulder of exploit developers and some researchers to some level, but I'm not standing on the shoulders of other people to do my job. It's one of the things when I was doing red teaming, when I was doing more of general security, and I was conducting network pen tests and systems tests and stuff like that, I was using typical tools like the Metasploits and that sort of stuff, where I was leveraging stuff that was already known, scripts that somebody else already wrote for vulnerabilities that someone else found. And I would launch this thing, pop a box, have shell, and feel like a tough guy, right? Well, the reality is, it's like all I did was just run a couple of scripts that somebody else found. Yeah, I mean, I put the pieces together to make it happen, but it's almost kind of like being Mario or Luigi. You're just taking the pipes and connecting the pipes together, but you're not actually building the pipes yourself, right? And so for what I love about web application security is while the categories of vulnerability still exist, every vulnerability I find is a 0 day. Right? Every vulnerability I find is the first time it's being found. And I have to tune and write an exploit that fits just perfectly in the context of that particular vulnerability. And so when I find something and I exploit something, I actually feel like I've done it, right? That I didn't have to use somebody else's tools and knowledge to do it. I did it all on my own. And so I get a real good sense of fulfillment when I find web application security vulnerabilities that I did not get when I ran Nessus, found an old server, popped it with a known exploit, and had got shell on the box, right? To me, that was a lot less fulfilling. So for me, it comes down to that. And if you think about it, that's why that's why the tooling is so different for those two as well, right? I mean, I mentioned Nessus and those types of scanners. All they're doing is fingerprinting services based on things that are already known, and then telling you, hey, you can use this thing to go exploit it. Whereas web application security scanners aren't nearly as good at finding vulnerabilities. And the reason why is because they're trying to do the job of the exploit developer. They're actually starting like you. They have no knowledge of this thing. They have to learn about it, fuzz it, find the interesting behavior, tune a payload to make it work. And so they're trying to do something that's way, way, way harder than a network scanner or something like that. And so you can see it in the tooling as well. To me, it's just more challenging and way more thrilling. Yeah, somebody said the thrill of the unknown.
The thrill of the unknown.
Thrill. Yeah.
FedEx. I also want to point out, I mean, Tim, like, it's a freaking boss statement. Like, every bug I find is a 0 day. Like, I had to reflect on that for a minute, but like, that's true. I mean, it really is a true statement, which is bananas. Yeah. If you think about it. So I know you're helping clients and stuff. I mean, you just tell the developers they get fixed. It's not like you're publishing CVEs and getting these things. It just becomes a security patch for the application.
Yeah. In fact, I don't think there's not a single CVE in my name. In fact, most of the time, if I'm finding something that's CVE worthy in a commercial product while I'm doing a test, I typically give it to that organization to handle. Mostly because I don't want to spend the time dealing with the whole process. Right? I'd rather continue to do what I love to do than go through the paperwork and bureaucracy. So I hand it to them and say, hey, you go back to your vendor and report this, and however you want to manage it's fine. Here's the vulnerability. You take care of it. And I don't know whether that's responsible or irresponsible. That's just the way that I've often done it when vulnerabilities in commercial software
it's certainly it seems like the most optimized path to get the knowledge to them so they can get it fixed and everybody wins, versus slowing it down a little bit with responsible disclosure and having to explain how you did it and show it and all these other things. So I think it's cool. It's pretty dope, honestly, Tim. It's pretty boss. So let's talk about something that when I had a phone call with Tim like last week or 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, bro, like, unbelievable, Recon NG. And he's like, actually, we should talk about that. So for those of you who do not know, right, there's a good amount of you in chat right now. Some of you are a little bit newer to the industry. Tim is the creator of a tool called Recon NG framework. Now, Tim, I'm gonna be bringing up some images here, but if you could you explain what the tool is and how it fits into the broader landscape of web application security testing, maybe why you created it? And you could see this is the ASCII art that you see when you first open it up. You'll notice it does say Black Hills InfoSec here. So Tim's got relationships to Black Hills. We all love ourselves some Black Hills. And it's up on his GitHub right now. I'll drop a link to it if you're interested. So Tim, please tell us about Recon NG.
Yeah, so back when I was in 2012, John hired me at Black Hills Information Security. I think I may have been full-time employee number one, but Ethan Robish was there at the time as well. I believe he was an intern. And very, very soon after I was hired, he came on board as well. But it was very early on in the early days of VHIS. And as we were putting the practice together and started and conducting our testing, we found that OSINT, there was a lot of, back then, there was a ton of really awesome resources for gathering information about stuff, like anything. Obviously, information gets more and more locked down as that information is now the product more than any other product at this point. Information is. So people protected a lot more. Back then, it wasn't as protected. And so you could spend a very long time just sifting through resource after resource after resource, finding information. Okay. And so what John and I came up with was, we got to find a way to do this quicker. Not necessarily automate it, but just do it quicker. And since a lot of these resources were scriptable, we started writing just one-off Python scripts to do this. And so we wrote a few scripts to scrape this website and this one scrape that one. And then we just run these scripts. And I had the idea of just putting them together in a way where not only would we just have modules that we could run within a particular framework, but that other people could also write modules for new resources that come up that they want to scrape or whatever. And then they could just add them to the community pool and the tool would just grow and become pretty awesome. And so that's what it came down to. In fact, the first talk that I gave on it was, 2013 or 14 at DerbyCon, actually. And it was, the whole idea behind it was, let's do OSINT on the National Security Agency in 50 minutes from stage. And I just got up on stage and we did all the Recon NG stuff against the NSA and was dumping all kinds of crazy stuff. And it was just really neat to see how much information, and I'm sure a lot of it's fake because people use NSA just to make, fake information in various places. But it was just neat to see how much information that you could dump in 50 minutes if you automated some of these resources that were available back then. And so it's really, all those talks are still out there. They're on my my about page at landmaster53.com if you want to see some of those. The tool does not work the same way as it did then. I mean, it's been rewritten probably 3 or 4 times over the past 10 years. But it's neat to see that goal come to reality where you could just make that happen. In an hour, you can save yourself a ton of time. And that's what it was all about, was just automating it enough to save time while also not losing control to a fully automated tool. But yeah, it'd be towards the bottom of that, I think.
Yeah, I was just kind of like letting it breathe a second so people could see. I'll drop a link to this. This is Tim's personal blog or website, however you want to call it, landmaster53.com. We're talking to Tim Tomes, web app security expert. And specifically around this Recon NG tool. Here's 2012 DerbyCon and 2011 Lurking in the Shadows. So it's probably this one right here, 2.0.
So 2012 was when it was scripts, and that was one of the side chats. And then 2013, it was on the main stage, I think.
Lookma, no exploits.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Oh, and I saw, like, briefly, I saw some like Ninja Turtle action in there.
That was Donatello.
Donatello. Oh, good. Gosh, that's great. Yeah, I'll drop a link to all this in chat right now. But yeah, just super powerful tool, super useful. I know it comes pre-packaged with most Kali instances, which I don't know if you see that as a point of pride or not, but that, to me, that's kind of cool. Yeah. I'm gonna go keep going, please. Yeah.
Yeah, the funny thing about it, I'll let everybody in on a little secret. I haven't used Recon NG in probably 8 to 10 years. Okay, now is it a dead project? No, not necessarily. Like I still watch the issue tracker for the core of the framework, not so much the modules because those things change way too often. But I definitely watch the core framework and manage any major issues that show up there. But when I shifted in 2014, I shifted back over to 100% web application security and not like pen testing web apps as a part of an environment, like just the code and just the applications. And by doing that, that essentially removed OSINT from my methodology. I just don't do it anymore. My clients don't want me to do it. They don't expect me to do it. That's not what they're paying me for. And so it's not a part of what I do on a daily basis. But tooling, and you mentioned open source tooling, is a huge part of my, I don't know if you want to call it my career, but it's just things I love to do, my hobbies. Mm-hmm. And so there's been plenty of other tools that I've written since then that I really enjoy. There's Recon NG, Honey Badger, which some folks may have heard of. That's another Black Hills related thing. It was a project I worked on, started working on there as a result of some stuff that we were doing as contractors. And then my most recent thing that no one knows about, that I really think folks should pay attention to because it's pretty darn cool, is basically a way to deploy Burp Suite Pro nodes and then manage scans from a centralized server. And I know somebody's probably thinking, that sounds a bit like Burp Enterprise. And I will tell you that that's kind of exactly what it is. It doesn't provide all the features that Burp Enterprise does, but if you want some of that functionality without all of the, there it is right there. If you want some of that functionality without all of the extra stuff that Enterprise comes with, this is a free solution that only requires you to have your Burp Pro licenses. It doesn't have any separate licensing or anything. If you got Burp Pro licenses, you can leverage this. And I've got the blessing of Defeed Studdard, who is Portswigger himself, to actually have this tool in existence. And so it's a pretty neat project. It's one of my favorite ones that I'm currently working on there. So, but yeah, I'm still writing a lot of code and a lot of stuff. Recon NG is not nearly the central, the focal point of my open source contributions as it was at one point in time. But it's still kind of fun to talk about and to think about what it was. And I find it crazy that people still use it. But I do. I get emails from students that are like, "Hey, my professor gave me this homework on Recon NG, but nothing works." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that assignment's like 6 years old."
That's so funny.
It
makes me think of like Smash Mouth's All-Star song. Like you can't like get away from Recon NG being what people know know you about. Question coming in from FedEx. As a web app security practitioner, what code languages do you know, or should you know, or practice?
Sure. Yeah. I'll answer. As I answer that, I also saw somebody mention that they see I've been in the upstate a couple times. I live in the upstate. Hello from Duncan, South Carolina. Okay. So nice. Yeah, I am in upstate South Carolina. So for me, I think you should pick one back end and one front end, right? Because in that thing, it's actually harder for us than it is for the developers. Because developers really only got to pick one. Like if I'm a really good front end developer, I can just work on front ends for the rest of my career. Same thing with a back end developer. As a tester, we have to understand both. And so I would always say pick a front end, pick a back end, and learn that. And now, which ones would I select? So I would default on the ones that are just a little bit easier, in my opinion, or the ones that cast the widest net. Right. And so like Java and .NET, like those are massive. I'm still encountering so many applications that are written in Java and .NET. I actually despise writing in those languages. So I don't learn either of those things. But something like Node is very popular on the back end. Python, believe it or not, is really popular on the back end too. Not as popular as those other enterprise solutions, but it's still pretty popular. So you can't go wrong, I think, with a Python or a Node back end. And on the front end, any one of the three major JavaScript frameworks, Angular, React, Vue, is going to introduce you to that whole world and how that operates, because it's wildly different than vanilla JavaScript. Okay. So I think that that's important as well. But understanding how modern front ends work, understanding how modern back ends work, and then pick a language. To me, Python is just really easy. It's almost human readable, which makes it really beginner friendly. And then I would say on the front end, Vue.js. For me, has been the most accessible version of those really heavy front end frameworks. So if you're looking for two very specific recommendations, I would say those. But I think you probably won't go wrong selecting any of the popular ones.
So just a quick question. This is like a speed question. You don't have to go too deep. Like I've seen some of the youngs, like some of these Gen Zs people, like they're like, "Oh, like you use Python," because I do Python too. Like, "Oh, Python, you old you boomer, you millennial," and like Rust is like Rust is if you're cool. Go if you're cool. So like as someone who lives and breathes code, I'm sure you've played with Rust and Go. Like, what is this overrated or what? Because I still do Python, and I was glad to hear you say Python.
No, I haven't spent a bunch of time in Rust or Go, but from what I can tell, they're not as high level as Python is. I believe they're a little bit lower level. Like Rust is probably the alternative for C, not necessarily the alternative for Python.
Are you serious? So you have to do like memory allocation and clean up after yourself and stuff?
I don't know. I've not played with Rust, so I don't know fully. But a lot of the developer folks that I listen to and follow, when I hear them talk about it, it sounds more of a replacement for that style of programming than it is for the Python style of programming. Go is probably more along the lines of the same level as Python is in terms of how high level it is. But I don't know. Here's the crazy thing. They're still teaching Java at universities. They haven't even like, they're like, ooh, wow, we should start teaching Python at universities because it's like the really hot thing. No, it's been around forever, and they're still, and so it's no, Python is not at all a dying language. Boomers writing Perl, man.
Boomers writing Perl. Yeah, yeah, dude. I came up on like I got forced to learn Perl because the first job that I ever got was like like they were a Perl shop, and like it interviewed me on Friday and said, "Do I know Perl?" And I said no, but I'll know it on Monday. And I spent all weekend. I mean, because obviously I have a computer science background. Like once you know how to program, like you could pick up especially an interpreted language pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I was ironically at the developer conference I keynoted at last Friday. There was one of the talks there was modern web app development in Perl. So that was interesting. If someone's really interested in writing web apps in a boomer language, check out that talk at Carolina Code Conference.
That is interesting because I always thought Perl was I thought Perl was dead. Like I thought it was like Fortran or COBOL, like it's just like kind of dead,
I'm going to open up a terminal and type Perl in Mac OS 14 and it's still there. So yeah, it was there. I just got the Perl prompt when I hit it. So
I love it. I love it. So, so Tim, okay. So one interesting thing that we kind of touched on, but I want to go deeper here is that Tim, you're a practitioner. You obviously do consulting. You get into the code and find 0 days all over the place, but you're also a trainer in web application security. So I'm kind of curious, like as a trainer, you're training students all the time. For the people who are in chat are like, oh, I'm going to explore web application security as a potential area of interest. Like, what are some of the common challenges that you find students regularly are like encountering when you're teaching them web application security? And I'm going to bring up PracticeSec so we can look at some of the training you do as well. But could you talk about that? Is there something? Is it like cross-site request forgery they lose their mind on, or is it something not web app specific? Or I'm just curious.
Yeah. So we've touched on it a little bit already. It really comes back to, once again, understanding web apps and how they're designed specifically. Now, we've talked about programming. We've talked about just understanding generally how to program them. But another thing that I find that really, and I may be the only web application security class that even mentions this topic, but when I talk about architectural design patterns, like the different ways you can architect a web application, whether it's fully server-side rendered or partially server-side and client-side rendered, and all the different ways, not all the different ways, but I talk about 4 major architectural design patterns in my class. And there are vulnerabilities that are specific to these architectural design patterns. And so knowing the architectural design pattern that the application you're testing uses can actually completely remove you having to look for some vulnerabilities, but then also indicate that you really need to look on this for this other vulnerability because it's more common when that architectural design pattern is used. So once again, it's that developer mindset, understanding how applications are written and how they're architected really seems, and that's probably, and the reason why that's probably the most common struggle is because I get so many folks that are coming into, that want to get into web application security, but they're coming from network security and system security and those types of things. And so once again, that gap is much larger to get across to go from there to web AppSec than it is to go from developer to web AppSec. So the question you're asking is all those things that stand in that gap, right? And that's all about the developer mindset and understanding how web apps are architected. I would say that's the biggest struggle. Trying to think if there's anything else there to mention, but yeah, I think that's certainly the biggest one.
Well, so let's take a look at it. So this is Tim's practical web app pen testing class, and I've seen some other ones, but what is this in person? Is it virtual? How many days is it? Like what is this training that you've built? Because it's based on all your years of experience, right?
Oh, definitely. And so I used to teach for the SANS Institute. Okay, and I'm sure most of the folks on your channel are familiar with who SANS are. Yeah. And so I used to teach for them. I taught web app pen testing, and I also did some quality assurance for that web app pen testing class there. And one of the common threads that I noticed for folks that would come out of Security 542 is they sat in class with me for 5 days of training and then 1 day of CTF. They're going to walk away with something, but the thing that they were walking away with was just knowledge. It was just knowledge. Like they had learned about vulnerability X and vulnerability Y, and maybe they talked about how to write a report and do this other thing, But what I found was that students did not walk out of those classes with the confidence to do the job. They had more knowledge, but they didn't really know how to apply the knowledge. And so that's when I started having the idea that I want to change how I teach, how I teach web app pen testing. Yes, talk about the vulnerabilities. Yes, talk about the tools. Yes, introduce the methodology. But rather than just talk about the methodology, actually live out the methodology in the classroom. From beginning to end, conduct a test, get into the mind of an actual web app pen tester, make decisions for decisions to be made, run into broken stuff, like not just a broken app, but broken tools, have to troubleshoot and work through it. But spend in that particular class is 24 hours in the classroom together. So not 24 hours in a row, but 24 hours total. And we just go through and we conduct an assessment from beginning to end and think through all the different problems and all the different potential vulnerabilities that could exist there. And what I found is that students walk away from that training now actually feeling like actually better at their job on Monday, right? They don't just have more knowledge. They are actually practically better and feel like, okay, now I know where to start. I know how to make my way through and what it should look like at the end. Now they have all those pieces, which gives them a lot more confidence to actually do the job. That helps people that are already doing it because it gives them a clearer picture of what right looks like. But it also helps people that aren't already doing it because now they're getting a good start into what it should look like. They get a really good view of that before they ever step into it for the first time. And so that was so important to me was that confidence. It's just huge because I remember what it was like stepping out of 542, taking on my first web app pen test and going, I know what cross-site scripting is, but I have no idea what I'm doing with this app. And not only that, but none of this looks like it did when it did in the classroom. Like everything looks different now. I'm lost, right? It was just, I remember what that felt like. And so I wanted to solve that problem. That's basically what PWAPT does.
So is it designed with is it like a lab in a web app that you've custom built? So where all the, all the Easter eggs are, whatever you want to say it, in order to be able to control that student experience?
Yeah, so I built an entire suite of applications. In fact, if you want to pull it up, it's in my GitHub. It's an application suite called Owned Hub.
Let me pull it up real quick. You can guide me here. Here's Landmaster 53. There were some questions where the other 52 are. All right, here we go.
You should see Owned Hub in there somewhere.
I do see Pwned Hub. We were on Pwned Hub. Oh yeah,
there it is. Okay.
By the way, I love that you take time to put just to take a small second departure, like vulnerabilities that get names and logos, they get mainstream penetration because people who are not in the scene can make it's easier to communicate. You have ASCII art in your scripts or like your command line tools and your GitHub repo. It seems that you have graphics on all of them. Thank you, Tim. Like it's literally what I'm vibing with. Like I need it. I need it more in my life. Honestly,
I never thought that was important, but now I do. So I just always did it because it just seemed like I don't know. I like seeing it I like seeing it when I go to the page, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is a suite of applications. There's multiple applications that represent different architectural design patterns. Yes, they are intentionally vulnerable, and they're designed around vulnerabilities that I've encountered in the wild. And so when we run into a scenario testing this particular application, I actually have a real life story that goes along with this. You're not going to see anything in these applications that wouldn't exist in the real world. And so they feel real. The vulnerabilities are real and feel real as well. It's not a CTF. There's not flags to find. It is, they're legit vulnerabilities, not contrived things that are meant for you to trigger them so that you get some sense of accomplishment and can gain some points. It's not done that way. It's developed as I go through and write those applications, I try to think, okay, if I'm a developer and what kind of feature might I need to incorporate that would force me to do this thing that could potentially lead to a vulnerability. And so I start with a secure feature, and then I look at what concessions, what decisions a developer would need to make in order to make this thing vulnerable. So not only is the end result, a vulnerability in an application, but also the end result is a really deep understanding of how a developer would get to that point in the first place. And so you learn a lot about, in fact, a little bit of a sidebar myself. If you want to learn about vulnerabilities, the best way to learn about them is to write them into your own applications, because you're going to learn, oh, wait a second, the framework doesn't let me do this. I actually have to do something unsafe, like disable a control. Why would I disable a control? Oh, well, because this other thing, if I really want this feature to exist, I have to disable the control. And so you begin to learn about frameworks, decision making in developers' minds, and how all that works out and conflict with one another, and how concessions are made and trust boundaries are born. Like, you learn about all of that when you do that. But anyway, that's how this application was born. And so it just feels very real. And the whole class is designed around testing those apps in a full pen test scenario with a statement of work, that's based on a contract, right? Like a make-believe contract. So we start off right at the beginning with this contract, and we just jump right into the test, and we assess these applications that exist in multiple environments.
Oh, so it's really, I didn't even realize you do like the contract and the engagement.
So we don't dive into how to actually do that. Okay. We don't do that soft skill part of it, but I have a statement of work. That's the beginning of the class. Right. That's the launch point for the class.
Now, does the class cover like reporting, or is the class conclude like with the technical piece of it?
It concludes with the technical piece.
Okay. Yeah, very cool.
And we talk a lot about that. Like most of the times during the class, the questions will come up. How do you keep notes? Where do you keep notes? How do you write findings? Like, what do you put in your findings, and how are they constructed? What are the different elements? Like, how much information, right? And so those are typically things we end up discussing throughout the natural course of the class, but there's no specific content for that. I could totally write another 1 or 2 day class just on creating a good deliverable because
for sure
it's not done very often. And there are some really key things, especially from a developer perspective, the person that's going to be fixing the problem. There's some very key things that they could use that are often missing.
You're known as, a Burp Suite master, right? So for those unfamiliar, I know you've written that tool, Burp Probe, to basically do the enterprise type thing for free and be able to control that. Can you talk about like what Burp Suite is, so those who aren't familiar could know it, and then how you use it in web application security? Because you're doing a lot of like build your own tools and dig deep into the code, but sure. Burp's kind of like I don't want to call it a Cadillac, but I mean, it's a very full featured interface. So can you kind of talk to us a little bit about it?
Yeah. So ultimately it's an interception proxy. At its core, it's what we call an interception proxy, which just gives us as the tester the ability to intercept our own traffic between the browser and the server. So basically we just want to be able to interact with the protocol at the protocol layer, which for HTTP is just that clear text layer there, that we want to interact with that because we have complete control over that. Because the attacker runs the browser, they have complete control over all aspects of how the protocol communicates. And so we just want to be able to interact with that. So interception proxy does that. That's what Burp does. Now Burp goes well beyond that, okay, by incorporating all kinds of other tools like, okay, well, now you've got this request that you've been tinkering with. How do you want to replay it? And so there's a tool to replay things. And they're like, okay, well, what if you want to send a whole bunch of requests to this one resource, but you want to change one thing in it over and over and over again? Well, there's a fuzzing tool for that. And then there's a cryptographic token harvester, and there's ways to compare. I mean, to create a list of the features that exist there would be very, very long. And it's one of the reasons why there's not a competing product. Defeat started writing this tool back in the mid 2000s. And I think it may have been, I'm not even going to say that because I don't know that it's true, but it started in the mid 2000s, like 2005-ish is when it started becoming a main tool as just an interception proxy, and has grown for 20 years. And I'm convinced, like, as someone that uses it every day and then also spends his free time, because I think it's fun, just messing with the tool and searching in all the deepest, darkest places within it where no one ever looks, I've uncovered features there that I don't even know that Portswigger is fully sure knows that they exist still. Because they'll put out a patch that changes something and it completely breaks this obscure tool that I use on every assessment. And I'll reach out and say, hey, don't know if you realize it, but you broke this particular thing. And they're like, wow, we didn't even realize that was there. Right? And so I'm convinced that they're not even, because they've got a huge development team now. Yeah. And they weren't there when some of these features were created. So there's a lot of stuff there that they're not even aware of. It's massive. The feature set is huge, but by its core, it's an interception proxy, but it's been put on steroids. And then in addition to that, right, there's an extension API, which allows you, if Burp doesn't already do the thing you need it to do, then you're just a few steps away from making it do the thing that you need it to do. And so that's in fact, all that we're talking about is explored in great depth in my other class, which is Practical Burp Suite Pro Advanced Tactics, PBAT.
Let's pull that up here.
And that's that is a super fun class, because basically it's all about hacking the hacker tool, right? We take Burp and we just, and let me blend these kind of two together if you don't mind for a second, Jerry. Throughout the course of PWAPT, we're going to run into problems, particularly with the more modern application. We're going to run into problems that we cannot solve with just basic Burp. Okay, things that Burp was not designed to do, but we want to be able to use Burp to do it because it's our one-stop shop. What PBAT, and we solve some of those problems in PWAPT, but there's so much depth that we need to go into to solve some of those problems that I had to create a whole nother course for that. And that's what PBAT does, is it takes us, that we take Burp and we begin to bend it. We bend it to its limits to make it do the things that we need it to do to handle some of the more complex problems in modern applications, like OpenID Connect authentication. How do you manage that with an automated scanner? Or multi-factor authentication. In PBAT, we talk about ways to do that, the ways to actually not necessarily do that in an automated way, but still be able to leverage our tools, even though our applications use things like multi-factor authentication and so on and so forth. Problems like that, complex authorization issues, all kinds of interesting stuff. And then I actually go into teaching you how to write extensions, but not full extensions, right? Give you the ability to actually introduce a little bit of code into the Burp interface to do some things you need to do without having to go write a full extension. So that's really, you could take PBAT on its own and it would be valuable if you're already a Burp user. But if you want to take your Burp knowledge from zero to hero, it's great to throw that on top of PWAPT, because PWAPT gives you that experience with the tool, and then PBAT takes you to hero with it. Basically, every trick I know, you will learn through those two classes. Every trick that I use.
So are those, again, can you remind us how does someone take either of these classes?
That's a good point. So when I first started training, most of my classes were public. Like I would go teach them at a conference, or I would throw up a link on one of the things, and a lot of people would sign up, and I would go get a conference room at a hotel or something like that. Nowadays, it's a lot of private companies, government companies bring me in. They want to just train their 10, 15 people, throw in some developers or whatever. So the vast majority of it is that, but I do have public offerings, usually somewhere between 2 to 4 times a year for each class. Once again, that's all based on how busy I am with private training. So 2 to 4 times a year, I do teach the classes publicly. And then you just go to that events page on my webpage. So you've already got it up. If you switch over to the events page on the website, you'll see the register links there. Yeah, you'll see the register links there right now. I've got PWAPT coming up.
Oh, you have one like next week.
Yeah, in 2 weeks, I think it is. And then PBAT is a little bit later this fall. And then there's a bundle there for if you want to buy both of them. There's a $500 discount if you buy both.
Oh, that's awesome.
Now these are virtual. All my training is live. I don't do anything on demand. So everything is live, but the vast majority of it is virtual live. So it'll be done remotely from the comfort of wherever you want to be, right? And I also don't like to do 8-hour training days, because I think that's exhausting for students. And so what I do is 4 to 5, depending on the class, 4 or 5 hour training days. And so we'll train for like half the day, and then you can either reset your brain, take your knowledge and apply it in the test you're conducting, or just go back to work and do something else for 4 hours. Whatever it is, your employer doesn't lose you for an entire week, right? You get to actually touch base at least every single day after class. So I always found that 4 to 5 hours a day works well, but it's all virtual, remote, and done that way.
Taekwon Gong wants a follow-up. Is the PWAPT or PBAT, can a beginner take them, or do you have to be a pen tester already? Like, what's the prerequisites?
Yeah, so I don't know how I actually accomplished this, to be quite honest with you. Like PWAPT for some, and once again, I'm still not sure. I've never had anybody take the class that didn't walk away and say, at least with the feedback that I've received, didn't walk away and say that they got a lot of value out of it. And this is principal level consultants that take it, and complete folks that are brand new to web application security take it, or a developer that's never thought about security in their life, right? No matter who it is, comes in, you always walk away with something. And I think it's just the nature of how the depth I go into my own processes, my own thought process. Like even if you've been conducting a web app test for 5-10 years, the depth I go through and how I think through a problem gives you ideas of different ways, different perspectives, how to use the tool a little bit differently. Like if you come in and get nothing from a vulnerability perspective, you might walk away with a whole wealth on process and tooling knowledge, right? Or maybe you come in, you're already a Burp expert. Well, now you know how to apply Burp to find vulnerabilities. So there's always something in it for anyone. I think PWAPT, certainly if you're new, that's new person friendly as well as experienced person friendly. PBAT, it's one of those things where you can't use Burp without the context of web application vulnerabilities, right? So in PBAT, we definitely, all the scenarios are driven by some sort of vulnerability, but we do not talk about the vulnerabilities. Like I'm not going to go in and explain, describe and go through a whole lesson on what this vulnerability we're about to attack is, because that's what PWAPT is for, right? Mm-hmm. PBAT says, hey, here's a problem this vulnerability presents. Let's go solve it with the tool. And then we focus just on Burp. So that's not as beginner friendly as PWAPT.
Yeah, that almost sounds like how to use like a gun or a knife or something like that. And this one's like, how to use multiple types of knives and interesting ways to use the knife and different techniques to hold the knife. Yeah, it seems more like becoming almost like an all-star with Burp.
Well, the interesting thing is you could, from a Burp perspective, you could actually just walk into PBAT without any experience with Burp. But if you have no experience in web app security, that's where, like, if you were in web app security and you've used Zap your entire career, you've never touched Burp, PBAT would be great for you, because you already have knowledge of vulnerabilities. You just want to know the tool better. And Burp and PBAT does start very low and slow, and then it ramps up really quick. And so if you already know about the vulnerabilities and know nothing about Burp, it would still be okay. But the problem is most people, they kind of come together. If you don't know anything about web app vulnerabilities, chances are you don't know anything about Burp, or and vice versa. So that's normally what ends up happening. But yeah, if someone's coming in and they have knowledge of vulnerabilities, they just want to know about Burp, then it would work for them too. That's normally not the case.
I love it. Now, Tim, we are running low on time. So, but I want to ask you about some upcoming stuff. I know we've got the training coming up, but Chris K.L. had a question earlier and I really liked it. What kind of trends are you seeing as like cloud native apps, microservices? Like there's a lot when it comes to web application security. This isn't your dad's LAMP stack. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. So I do see a lot of cloud native, right? I do see a lot of cloud native, and so they can mean a couple different things, right? It could just be like your dad's LAMP stack could now be running in the cloud, right? So that's fine. You can do that, but I think of like serverless architectures and stuff like that. So I do see quite a bit of that. Pick your cloud provider. I've definitely tested apps that run there. The vast majority of the stuff, even if it's old tech, is typically running in the cloud. I'm not really. At a minimum, some other co-location. Very rarely am I dealing with applications that are actually internally housed, which is wild to me, because when I started my career, everything was in your own data center, right? Now nothing's in their own data center. But to be honest with you, I do see a lot of the cloud stuff and serverless architectures, but not nearly as much as I'm still just seeing the normal stuff, right? I still just see a lot of, like right now, I'm testing an old .NET Web Forms application. It's misery. I hate that framework. Okay? But people still write apps, and this is the first time this app has ever been touched. It's still in testing. It hasn't even hit production. It's a brand new app written in .NET Web Forms. So I still run into a lot. It is running in Azure though, so it is in the cloud. Okay, so I still run into that. You're going to run into probably a lot of cloud, a lot of stuff that's running in the cloud. So those architectures do matter. But as far as a lot of that really bleeding edge stuff, not as common as you might think, at least not in the enterprise level.
As a follow-up question for me, asking for a friend, do you find like Docker containers are, I don't want to say secure, but like, do you find that two implementations, right? Me and DJBSec, we implement and build the same exact service or whatever, but I'm doing it with Docker and he's doing it more traditional. Do you find that the Docker
inherit some level of like left of boom type built-in security features?
Ooh, that's interesting. By any chance, I won't claim to be a container security expert. That's not, I'd use containers for a lot of things, especially from a development standpoint and just from a tooling standpoint. I'll spin up the container with a tool in it versus try to install all the dependencies on my host system. So I'll do that quite a bit too. But for me, from a developer perspective, I'm tempted to put a lot more sensitive stuff inside of a container that I normally wouldn't put on a bare metal system. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's why I was asking, because I feel the same way.
Yeah, my containers are running root, man. Everything's running root in the container. You know what I mean? But I would never do that on a bare metal system where I'm managing the operating system, right? So it's a very strange world where, yes, they're more containerized and kind of segmented now. They each have their own individual purpose, so there's not a whole lot of crawling around it. You're getting limited access if you break into this one thing that I have inside the container, right? But at the same time, because of that, I think they tend to be a little bit more open-ended, right? A little bit more loosely managed from that perspective. At least I know that I do that personally as a developer. So, or I'm tempted to. So yeah, I won't claim to be an expert, but I don't know if that even answers your question. But
no, it does. I mean, I feel the same way. I mean, I'm not a developer. I mean, a million years ago I was, but like Docker didn't exist. But I find myself when I do use containers being like a little, like almost treating it like a box and being like, oh, everything in the box is cool. Like I don't need to worry. So I thought I'd ask you as an expert.
Everything's root. Everything runs as root.
It is, let it go. So we've been talking with Tim Tomes, founder of PracticeSec. You can see the URL there in his lower third. Tim, I know you got the training coming up September 9th. We should touch on that, but where can people, like, you speak a lot, you do trainings a lot, you're in the community a lot. What do you have coming up as far as like events or activities where people could get themselves some more Tim?
Yeah, so I definitely have the training coming up both in 2 weeks, and then I think it's probably 5 or 6 weeks after that is the other one. I'll be at Wild West Hackin Fest. So like I said, I'll be talking right after you at Wild West Hackin Fest.
Oh yeah.
That's on day one. On day 2 of Wild West Hackin Fest, I'm doing a 2-hour workshop on deserialization. So we'll be discovering and attacking, going through the whole process of exploiting a insecure deserialization vulnerability. And so we'll be doing that there. That'll be a fun 2-hour workshop. I'm trying to think. There may be other podcasts and stuff I end up landing on at some point in time, but that's all I've got planned. Those 2 classes and Wild West Hack Fest is kind of my fall. I'm missing B-Sides Augusta because I don't want to try to do that the week before Wild West Hackin Fest. And then B-Sides Greenville, I'm going to be out of town, so I won't be able to do that one either. However, I wouldn't mind trying to get down to Charleston. That may be a good gap filler.
Yeah. Hey, November 1st, it'll be there. CFPs are open, Tim, and we're doing we're tomorrow at 3 p.m. for everybody in chat right now, because I scheduled it today. Tomorrow at 3 p.m. we're actually doing a live stream. This is one of the things that I'm really big on is community. So we're doing a live stream at 3 p.m. Eastern time, and it's really going to be like the organizers of the conference sharing updates, asking for volunteers, giving information, because we've got a ton. We've got new sponsors. We've got CTF set up, Lockpick Village. We got a whole bunch of updates to share with everybody. So if you can make it, even as a visitor or an attendee, Tim, but based on your lanyards behind you, you don't do attendee. You do like trainer / speaker. So we'll have to see. But at a minimum, I'll see you in Deadwood, and many of the people in chat are going to Deadwood as well. This is a Simply Cyber community is big in Wild West Hackin Fest, so we'll have a meetup down there. You're more than invited now that you've been a guest on the show to be there for the team photo that we do every year, and it'll be fun.
That's awesome. Hey, and just so you know, like I've gone to a conference once where I wasn't the speaker, and then ended up finding an empty stage during a break and giving a talk.
Really? Oh, okay. So you make it happen. That's funny.
I went to the security guard. I was like, I got a group of people, and I want to like show this thing with them can we have the room for a few minutes? They're like, yeah, we got like an hour till the next presentation. So I just went in there, and then people just started trickling in. Next thing I know, there's 50, 60 people in there, and I'm just talking about this thing.
Oh my God, dude, like a renegade broadcast. It's like Christian Slater in that Pump Up the Volume movie. Do you remember that? Where he had that radio station on the Jeep? Oh, that's so good. Well
Yeah.
done, Tim. Obviously a man who loves to share knowledge and help people out, demonstrating it over and over again. So our guest has been Tim Tomes, founder of Practical Security Services, a web app security professional trainer. Go check out his training. Go to practicesec.com/events. You'll see his upcoming training where you can learn directly from the man himself. It's awesome. Tim, on behalf of all of Chad, who was here the entire time, great questions, great engagement. I would like to extend a sincere thank you for your time. Thank you for your expertise, and thanks for sharing all this knowledge with us. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, man. I really enjoy it.
All right. Thank you so much. All right, everybody, be good. And remember, until next time, stay secure. Content. Keep the cybersecurity train going by connecting with the other Simply Cyber community resources. We have the Discord server that's lively and always keeps the conversation going. You can connect with me directly on LinkedIn. And also every single weekday morning on the Simply Cyber channel, we're doing live daily cyber threat briefings, 8 a.m. Eastern time, as well as Thursday at 4:30 p.m. We're doing live stream interviews with industry experts, and we produce videos that we push out every Wednesday